Welcome to the 15-Minute Financial Feast podcast, bringing you 15-minute segments to help you retire with purpose on time. We're serving up food for thought and bread for the head. Are you hungry to learn? Here are your hosts, Mark Triplett and Troy Westendorf.
During this episode of the 15-Minute Financial Feast podcast, we're listening in on Troy Westendorf and Mark Triplett's Lunch and Learn series, where they covered a wide variety of retirement and tax planning strategies to help you retire with purpose on time. Hey, everybody.
Guys.
Welcome to our 15-Minute Financial Feast. I'm your host, Mark Triplett.
Troy Westendorf.
And this week, we're going to be talking about the difference between traditional IRAs and Roth IRAs and kind of deciding which is best for you based on the characteristics of both. But before we do that, you may not know this, but Troy Westendorf is a farmer. And this week, when Brianna leaves, those of you who work with us know Brianna here in the office. Brianna actually happens to be Troy's daughter. She's going out of town, actually going to Colorado with her husband. And she has a menagerie. I mean, we were talking 3 Australian Shepherds, right?
Yeah.
How many chickens?
I think 12. I'm not
ducks?
100% sure. I'll know.
30
2
other
ducks.
Any other animals over there?
Not that I know.
All right. So he's going to be taking care of all of those. So he's going to be old Mick Westendorf at a farm this weekend. And he's super excited about it because he loves chickens.
Love chickens.
So let's talk about contributing to an IRA versus a Roth IRA and which might be better for you. Troy, why don't you lead us off by just kind of detailing what is a traditional IRA? What are the characteristics of that? What is a Roth IRA? What are the characteristics of those? And I guess before we start there, I want to make it really, really clear. We're going to be talking about the tax characterization of accounts, right, not investments. And oftentimes we get some confusion. Folks will ask questions like, well, is a Roth IRA risky or is a traditional IRA risky? Well, the investments that you put inside of the tax structure can be risky or not risky. We're not talking about investments here. We're just talking about the vessel, the tax structure. Traditional IRA could be invested in all kinds of stuff. A Roth IRA could be invested in all kinds of stuff. So just separate the investment part from the tax part. We're just talking about the tax characteristics of these 2 types of accounts.
Yeah. So when you talk about the traditional IRA, you're looking at a forever tax account. So it's forever tax. They're pre-tax contributions, meaning you can get a tax deduction for your contribution. That's tax deferred growth. So all the growth on the account's tax deferred. Distributions are taxed as ordinary income. So that's when it starts to get a little iffy when you're talking Social Security. So it could affect some of your taxes on Social Security. Distributions may impact Medicare premiums. We've kind of talked about that in the past. And those distributions are forced at age 72. So if you have a large nest egg in an IRA or a 401k, it's a similar
pre-tax account.
Account. And you're not wanting to necessarily use those dollars at 72, the IRS government comes in and says, hey, you got to start taking these distributions.
Yeah,
we want our money.
And those distributions could potentially get ever larger as you get older, forcing more distributions than you really want to take, and could really, really start to impact the percentage of your Social Security taxed at your next highest marginal tax bracket. Could really impact the surcharges on Medicare. And we won't get into it, but the whole widow's penalty that goes along with this, we've got a whole other separate episode on that topic alone. Where a single or a married couple filing jointly, all of a sudden, when one of them passes away, becomes a single filer, and those distributions are still being forced to come out. It can really make a mess of things from a tax perspective. So what about a Roth IRA then?
Yeah, so the Roth is just the opposite. So the Roth is a never taxed. So the difference is when we put the contributions, so up to age 50, you can do $6,000. After that, you do a catch up, $7,000. So it's the same as the IRA as far as dollars that can be put in. The difference is in the Roth, when you go to put those dollars in, you're not getting a tax deduction. So you can't put $6,000 in and get a deduction. So that's one of the key differences between the two. The growth is still tax deferred. The difference is when you go to pull these dollars out, you're not taxed on it. So it's not going to affect your Social Security because it's not going to come out as the taxable dollars are going to show they're not taxed.
Right. They don't impact the provisional income.
They don't impact that. They're not going to impact the Medicare surcharge we talked about with the IRMA. And there's no forced distributions at age 72. So
no required minimum distributions to begin for the owner. Now, for somebody who inherits an IRA or even a Roth IRA, there are distributions for that. But as the owner of the account, there's no forced distributions on our Roth IRA.
Yeah. So those are kind of the differences between the IRA and the Roth IRA. So the big question is from clients is, okay, so which is better? And
the answer to that often is, well, both. And before we jump there, Troy, you mentioned that the contribution limits for a Roth IRA or a traditional IRA would be $6,000 for 2020 and $6,000 for 2021. Yep. If you're over the age of 50, it's actually $7,000 as a $1,000 catch-up contribution. And oftentimes we're asked, well, can I do both? And the answer is yes, but only up to the limit. Right. So if you want to contribute $4,000 to a pre-tax IRA and you want to contribute $2,000 to a Roth IRA, the total of that $6,000, that's totally acceptable. If you want to contribute all to the pre-tax IRA, you can do that. If you want to contribute all to the Roth IRA, but you can't contribute $6,000 to each. Right. That would be the crossing over the contribution limit. There are also some income limitations on whether you can contribute to a pre-tax IRA or a Roth IRA. So if you're questioning whether or not you're able to contribute, definitely want to get with a financial professional who can guide you as to whether or not you can. Now, as to the question whether you should contribute to a traditional IRA or a Roth IRA, I mentioned a moment ago that, well, maybe you should contribute to both, or it really does depend. Yeah. And it comes down to, a possible combination of both might make a lot of sense just from a distribution standpoint, being able to blend those out. But let's talk about just a real good litmus test for whether you should be contributing to a pre-tax account like a traditional IRA or a Roth IRA. And many times we'll hear that, maybe somebody will ask us, should I contribute to a pre-tax account, a traditional IRA? My CPA said I'm going to save money on taxes. We've heard that a lot, yep. Right? Even our CPA, we love Chad Harrison. He's the CPA that works with our clients. We have to remind him every now and then that an IRA contribution, which is tax deferred, is not necessarily a tax savings. You are deferring taxes. And the way you determine whether or not it's a tax savings is what is your tax rate upon distribution. If your tax rate upon distribution is greater than your tax rate at the contribution, when you're deferring it, you're not saving taxes. On the flip side, let's say you've got $1,000, Troy, and you're going to contribute that to a pre-tax IRA, and you're in a 32% tax bracket, okay? Yep. High income earner. Then you turn around and you, when you distribute that in the future, you are paying taxes at, say, 12%, okay? So in that case, you deferred $320 of taxes, 32% on $1,000. You distributed that at a 12% tax rate, so you paid $120 of taxes on that distribution of that $1,000 later in the future. So in effect, you saved yourself $200 in taxes. Now, on the flip side, what if you are making contributions at 22%? Okay, let's say you're in the 22% bracket today, and you make contributions at 22%. So you're deferring $220 worth of taxation right now. And when you go to withdraw that money, you're in a 28% bracket because tax rates have gone up for some reason. Either your income's gone up or just tax rates went up because the government is trying to pay for all of the spending, the stimulus spending and the deficit. Right. So now you're distributing at 28% on $1,000. It's $280. You're actually paying $60 more in taxes than you would otherwise. So whether it's a tax savings or not really comes down to what is your tax rate when you defer it and make the contribution? What is your tax rate when you distribute it? And again, we're talking about pre-tax IRAs, not Roth IRAs. On Roth IRAs, all contributions are after tax. Right. And therefore, there really is no taxation on the distribution. It's all tax-free. So That's really how you decide whether you should be contributing to a pre-tax account or not. And I'll give you an example. Somebody had recently asked if they should contribute to a pre-tax account or not. And this person in particular had retired in December. Okay, so worked all the way through 2020, retired in December 2021, starting their first year of retirement. Okay, so income was much higher in 2020. Their projected income is going to be much lower in 2021. So in that case, they were in a 22% bracket. And the way we're able to kind of look through all of this and help folks make decisions is actually
a good question. How do you plan this stuff?
It's actually by using our planning program, Retirement Analyzer. And this is not a real case, a real couple. This is just one that we use for examples. It's Gary and Jenna Brown. They don't exist. They're not real people. But we can look at the tax tab and look year by year and determine what tax rate are we going to likely be in based off of your income from employment, or from once you retire, your income from pension, if you're lucky enough to have one, Social Security, distributions from pre-tax accounts, and help folks make those decisions. But in this particular situation, this person, we knew they were in a 22% bracket. Right. And we knew, because we'd done the planning, that the next year they're going to fall into a 12% bracket. So just by making a 2020 contribution, right? We're in 2021, but you can make that contribution for 2020. Yep. So we're making the contribution for 2020, getting and deferring taxes at 22%. Even if we immediately distribute it in 2021, same dollars, they're going to be distributed at 12%. So that's a tax savings. Right. So that's a clear-cut reason to do that. On the flip side, we have folks that maybe retired, now they're working part-time, they're in a low tax bracket, and they're eventually maybe going to have to distribute more money from pre-tax accounts later on. Right. But they were still working, they don't need it, and they want to contribute. In that case, maybe we'll recommend contributing to a Roth IRA. Or somebody who's younger, just starting out, their income's lower, maybe there's a lower tax bracket. Right. Funding a Roth IRA can make a lot of sense. So it's very specific to everybody's situation. There's no right or wrong answer. I really need to evaluate your economic situation today relative to what it's likely to be in the future, relative to what tax rates are likely to be in the future, and then make a determination. And it's okay to have both, because when you are in retirement, you have this thing called, well, not just in retirement, but when you file your taxes, most people today are filing taxes and receiving what is called a standard deduction. And the standard deduction for 2020 is $24,800 for a married couple. And in 2021, that's going to jump up to $25,100. Now, if you're over 65, for each individual over 65, they get an extra $1,350. So you get this standard deduction anyway. Right. So it's okay to have some pre-tax money. I mean, think about that. If you're distributing money from IRAs, but you know that roughly $25,000 is going to be completely free from tax anyway because of the deduction. You could have IRA or pre-tax money going into retirement, make that distribution, but still keep yourself in a relatively low tax bracket just because of the standard deduction, as long as you can blend out the forever taxed money and the never taxed money. So it really takes planning. This isn't something you set it, forget it. It's not something you just do randomly. You really have to organize all of your retirement resources, make plans, and then adjust as necessary as you're moving forward.
Yeah, one of the things we did discuss, Mark, that comes up a lot with clients is, can I contribute to a Roth IRA if I'm already contributing to my 401k?
That's a great question. The answer generally is yes, unless your income is over a certain limit to where you're phased out with the inability to contribute to a Roth IRA just because of income. But if you have a workplace retirement plan that you're contributing to, and you want to start a Roth IRA outside of that, or a traditional IRA for that matter, you can do that. You're allowed to do that. And if you've got one spouse who's working and another spouse who's maybe staying at home, taking care of the household and the kids, the working spouse can actually contribute for the the spouse who's staying at home as well, as long as you have earned income to do so. So there are a lot of nuances when it comes to what you can and cannot do with regard to contributions for both traditional IRAs and Roth IRAs. Seek out professional advice from a financial professional who understands this before you make irrevocable decisions, and and plan to make the most out of your resources, right?
Yep, absolutely.
So we'll be back in March with a new schedule of
March.
I know, right?
Good.
It does. It sounds warm, warmer. So in March, we'll have a few more episodes of the 15-minute financial feast. Look for our newsletter in your inbox. That will be coming out that first week in March, and it will have the schedule for March and the topics that we're going to be covering. If you have any questions about the topics we covered today, hit us up at mypt5.com. It's www.mypt5.com, and you can submit a question there, or just call our office.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So hopefully you found value in today's episode. We look forward to having you on our next 15-minute financial feast segment. Troy, until then, we always like to remind folks that every dollar has a purpose,
and every dollar has a timeline.
And we really want you to strive to retire with purpose on time.
On time.
Take
Thanks,
care,
guys. Take care.
You've been listening to the 15-Minute Financial Feast podcast. Remember, every dollar has a purpose and every dollar has a timeline. If you have questions about today's topic, schedule a call with a team member. Visit www.mypt5.com. Until next time, be sure you're taking steps to retire with purpose on time. Mark Triplett is an investment advisor representative of and advisory services offered through Royal Fund Management, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Nothing contained in this program should be considered an offer to buy or sell securities. Different investments have different risks associated with them, and not all investments are appropriate for all investors.